hopeless idealist if you must, but I'm of the mindset that in order to be at least a good Superman writer, you have to have a strong handle on and be able to write the characters of Superman and Lois Lane. You'd think that would be a common sense prerequisite in terms of someone being granted permission to write Superman in any kind of official capacity. Apparently it is not. But not only do you have to know how to write Superman and Lois individually, you have to know how to write them together, what their chemistry is like, why their dynamic, their relationship works. All this to say that I think Superman number 21 illustrates that our author Joshua Williamson has about as strong a handle on Superman and Lois as anybody in recent memory. Now remember, right now in the comics, Lois Lane is Superwoman and has all the same powers as Superman, so she and Superman can do things together that they couldn't do before. Case in point, in this issue, they go on sort of a date/training exercise on the moon. In reading their scenes together and their dialogue together in this issue, you really get a sense that these two have known each other for a long time and actively love each other. And that's so important in terms of Clark and Lois. And it's especially important that you capture that vibe now, because we've got this new Superwoman dynamic going on with Lois Lane. I actually kind of hope we see more of this training type stuff between Superman and Superwoman as the issues go on. I mean, Lois Lane is perfectly equipped to be a superhero emotionally and from a personal character standpoint, but she's not that experienced with super strength and things like that. Incidentally, and I'm sorry to say this about another man's wife, but Dan Mora draws Lois Lane with a bangin' ass in this issue. I mean, it just looks like two planetary bodies about to crash into each other. You know what I'm saying? Doomsday is in this story. Now, the thing about Doomsday is that when we first saw him in the early 90s in the comics, we didn't immediately see his gray and white spiky visage. He actually kind of had this green coverall suit on with red goggles, presumably for the express purpose of ripping the suit off eventually and getting the big dramatic reveal. Well, in this story, we've also got like a group or a cult of alien bad guys hanging around, and their headgear looks practically identical to the headgear that Doomsday had initially in those old 90s stories. That's a really cool callback to throw in there. I assume it's Dan Mora that did that. Really nice reference to the early 90s comics and Doomsday's first appearance. Captain America and the Red Hulk are about to square off on the big screen, so it's only natural that they're about to square off in the comics too. This is Sam Wilson, Captain America #1. So yeah, obviously Red Hulk is in Captain America Brave New World, which comes out next month. So this is a new 5-issue miniseries that is basically meant to ride the coattails of the movie and put Sam Wilson and Red Hulk together. I'm actually kind of surprised that Sam Wilson doesn't have his own Captain America series right now. I mean, I feel like he had one not long ago. Hopefully if this book does well, they'll give him one again. Torrin Clark does awesome covers. He did them for Boom, he does them for DC, and as we see here, he does them for Marvel as well. Great work. From a story perspective, the way that they get Cap and Red Hulk together didn't blow me away, but this book does do something that really interested me. Early in the issue, Sam attends a birthday party for a black character, and there's like a barbecue, and the guests at the barbecue are almost exclusively black, and there's a bunch of superheroes there. Storm is there, Miles Morales is there, War Machine, etc. And you know, when I talked about Black Lightning #1 a couple months ago, I basically floated the idea of an all-black superhero team, like a Black Justice League, that would, in part, tackle issues that the black community face. And I knew that certain people would hear that idea and call it too woke. But seeing a scene like this in a Marvel book was really cool because it made me wonder if maybe a team like that, a situation like that, isn't as far-fetched as I maybe think it is. We can always hold out hope, I guess. Absolute Wonder Woman number 3 illustrates why this series is, for my money, the most fun and the strongest of DC's Absolute books. Don't at me. Is that still a thing young people say? Don't at me? So in this issue, there's a big monster called a tetracide, and it's about to attack the city, and Wonder Woman has to protect people and get people to safety, etc. And of course, at one point, there's a sequence where she fights it with her giant sword. I really hope that at some point we get a bad guy in this book that also has a giant sword so that we can have a giant sword fight, kind of like Cloud Strife and Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII. Hate to be a broken record here, but our artist Hayden Sherman is really great with the hellish monster stuff. I love the look of the tetracide monster. I don't know if that's a monster plucked from mythology somewhere or if he created it, but either way, it's awesome. Absolute Wonder Woman thus far, for my money, has been a masterclass on how to tweak and change up a character, but still keep their core essence intact. Kelly Thompson has really done that with Diana in this book, really illustrating her capacity for love and sacrifice even. Like there's a panel in this issue, for instance, where Diana tells Steve Trevor basically that even in the depths of hell, love is transformative. And I don't know if you're ever going to find a sentiment that is more true to Wonder Woman than that. Deadpool Wolverine number 1 has a Frank Miller variant cover, which I looked at the other day and said, yep, that is a Frank Miller cover. Very Frank Miller-y. Not the most Frank Miller-y cover that I've ever seen, though. That spot is reserved for one of the All-Star Batman and Robin covers he did, like 15 years ago. Just Wonder Woman's ass for no reason. I think that was actually the name of the piece, Wonder Woman's Ass for No Reason. This is the main cover that they went with. But yeah, Deadpool Wolverine number 1, obviously riding the coattails of the movie, but there's a history of Deadpool Wolverine stuff dating back years. They've got a great grumpy guy, funny guy chemistry. I was actually mildly worried about this issue when I picked it up, because it's written by Ben Percy. Now, Ben Percy is very good, but he was also the guy who wrote Sabretooth War, that storyline in the Wolverine ongoing last year, and it saw Sabretooth do some pretty graphic things just for the sake of being graphic, like he cut up some kids, Revenge of the Sith style. Thankfully, there's nothing like that in here, though. This book delivers on the fun, which was the main thing that I wanted it to deliver on coming in. It's what I want any Deadpool Wolverine story to deliver on, really. From a story perspective, I can't say that I'm hugely enticed to come back, but I'm not opposed to coming back. Either way, Deadpool Wolverine number 1 is here if you like this sort of thing. Cable, Love and Nope. Look, I like the title to this. I really do. It's one of those gloriously silly titles. It's like Hot Tub Time Machine. The title is Cable, Love and Chrome number 1. You know, Love and Chrome could actually have been the title to Revenge of the Sith, come to think of it. That's the one where Darth Vader is in love with Padme, and then he gets put in the suit at the end. It kind of works. So as a reminder, the deal with Cable is that he's Cyclops' son from the future, and he hops through the time stream fixing problems, basically. He has a techno-organic virus, which is gradually turning him into a machine. But in this story, he jumps into a timeline where a bunch of rebel types have the virus and are fighting against it, and he meets a lady. That's exciting. I might not have gravitated toward this book normally, but I took a look at it because it's written by David Pepose. I think that's how you pronounce that name. And Pepose was also the writer of the recent Punisher miniseries that Marvel did with Joe Garrison as the main character. I really enjoyed that, so I was hoping that he would have similar luck with Cable. The verdict is kind of still out for me on this one because it feels like they're just starting to get into the meat of the story, but I'm curious, so we'll see. The solicitation for this issue, I think, refers to Cable as Marvel's most extreme X-Man. Fittingly, that's one of the most 90s descriptions for anything that I've ever heard. Although, you know what, if you look at this cover by Ian Churchill, you can't really deny it. I mean, that looks extreme. I mean, he's mad. Junkyard Joe returns in Geiger number 10. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Junkyard Joe is actually not a hobo. He is a robot. Not a robot hobo, though. Not a robo? So Junkyard Joe is like this robot soldier character that was introduced in the first Geiger book that came out pre-2024 when all this Ghost Machine stuff sort of relaunched. And I was really looking forward to Geiger number 10 because I had heard about this character, but I didn't know him, so I was curious about what he was all about. And from a writing standpoint, I was kind of curious about how our author here, Jeff Johns, would handle the balancing act. Like, how do you reintroduce the Junkyard Joe character while also continuing the Geiger and Nate story? Like, how do you balance those two? Johns handles that pretty well here. We get just enough about Junkyard Joe that you're curious and want to know more. And there is a handy-dandy Junkyard Joe exposition page in the back of the issue if you are looking for sort of an exposition dump on the character. Gary Frank is back on this issue, and he returns with a really strong opening sequence. We get a flashback with Tariq Geiger and his family, sort of establishing that he had a sensitive side at one point, and then we transition into some hard-hitting action. Good stuff. Lovely variant cover here for this issue by the great Jerry Ordway, paying tribute to, of course, Action Comics #1. The dynamic between Geiger and Nate the Nuclear Knight continues to have really good buddy appeal, which in many ways is the heart of this book. You know, when I look at the Nate character, I think of the actor Steve Buscemi, which is kind of odd because they don't look alike, but I don't know, I feel like if they ever turned Geiger into a movie, they could look to Steve Buscemi to play Nate. Although I guess he may have aged out of the role by now. Actually, I take that back. That's a bad idea. Steve Buscemi is often in that Happy Madison camp of actors that's Adam Sandler's production company. And with all due respect, I don't think Adam Sandler should even sniff the role of Geiger. I've got radioactive powers? Shabadoo! Superman is pondering whether any of us is ever truly beyond hope in Action Comics 1082. Meanwhile, I'm pondering something completely different. So this is the beginning of what I assume is going to be a 3-issue story arc written by John Ridley. And as I said earlier this month, if John Ridley writes something, it's generally at least worth a look. The story is basically about a redemption story gone wrong, and Superman bringing somebody over to the good side, but then they go back to the bad side, and Superman kind of loses faith in them, and again, it's a question of whether anybody is truly beyond hope. And you know, that's a nice sort of meaty premise for a Superman story, but you know, I got swept up with something that happens early in the issue on the artistic front. Okay, so your eyes are generally the most expressive part of your face. Like when I took photography classes in journalism school, they talked a lot about the importance of the eye, where you place the eye in the photo. The eyes are the window to the soul, all that kind of thing. I assume they teach you the same kind of thing in art school. Now, about 5 pages into this issue, we get a 2-page spread of Superman stopping a boulder from crushing a cop car with 2 policemen in it. And as you can see here, he's looking down and backward. So, like, we kind of have the majesty of Superman, the grandeur, but we can't see his eyes. We can't really see much of his face. And to me, that really undercuts the effectiveness of an image like this. I mean, he doesn't have to be looking directly into the camera, like he can be looking off the page, but it would just seem like it would be a more interesting image if you could see Superman's face. I think I know why it's drawn that way, though. On the very next page, there's a moment where Superman makes eye contact with the police officers he's just saved, and he's angry. So, like, that's a big moment where we get a glimpse into Superman's mental state. So, I don't know, maybe they didn't want to give you the eye contact on the 2-page spread so they could save it for that page? But what's weird is that, as you can see here, his eyes are, like, obscured by the redness from his heat vision. So, if they saved the eye contact for this moment, they kind of undercut this moment too by using the heat vision. Like, I get the idea that Superman's mad and, heat vision angry, but wouldn't it be more impactful to actually see his eyes and see the anger there? Just a weird set of choices here. Sort of an uncharacteristic stumble out of the gate, artistically speaking. It was an odd distraction for me. Yeah, I bought Rogue the Savage Land #1. Am I ashamed of that? No, but am I proud of that? Also no. Because, I mean, it's pretty obvious what this is. I mean, the litany of sexy variant covers kind of make it hard to miss. I believe one of the terms for it is cheesecake, i.e. use of PG-13 toned, sexualized female imagery to excite and entice male readers. This book is an excuse to put Rogue in a skimpy outfit, in an exotic location that also has dinosaurs. It's an exciting fantasy for, I guess, male fans to sort of insert themselves into. I guess I just wanted to see if there was going to be anything else to this, or if it was just going to blatantly and proudly be what it is. And I mean, there is a story here. It's set after a classic issue of Uncanny X-Men, so it takes place in the past, and it kind of fills in a gap, I guess. I just don't have a lot of use for that, personally. Hardcore Marvel buffs probably will, but I don't. So for somebody like me who's not super entrenched in Marvel and X-Men continuity, this just kind of is what it is. And I guess from a black and white perspective, there's nothing morally wrong with having a sexy book like this. I mean, pin-up style art is nothing new. I guess I would just hope that if you're picking up Rogue the Savage Land, you're also picking up books that are a little more... I'm struggling with the term I want to use here. What's coming to mind is creatively pure. But you know what? Hey, there's something to be said for selling comic books, so if this floats your boat, have fun. Behemoth #1 from Dark Horse Comics is the kind of story that I like to compare to Batman Begins. Not because Batman is in it, but, well, I'll explain why. Batman Begins on its own is a good movie. I think most people that are in their right mind would agree to that. But I think that even as we were leaving the theater, a lot of us understood that one of the main functions of Batman Begins was to be a good movie that sets up the great movie that comes out later. That movie, of course, wound up being The Dark Knight, which, for my money, is the best Batman movie ever made. Behemoth #1 is similar in the sense that on its own, it's completely serviceable and good, but it's teeing up something that could be really great. So in this movie, a big Cloverfield / kaiju type monster attacks a big city, and it swallows a bus full of people that, of course, has our main character on it. And on the final page, we see that our main character, as well as presumably a lot of other people, are still alive inside the literal belly of this beast. Normally, I wouldn't tell you something that happens on the final page of an issue, but in this case, it kind of sets up the whole premise and the meat of the story. And I just think that's a really awesome idea for a suspense / monster story. I'm really, really curious to see what we get in issues like 2 and 3. You know, I didn't mean to do this, but it's kind of fitting in a way that I started out talking about movies. Because as I was reading Behemoth #1, it occurred to me that, wow, this would make a really great, fun, interesting movie. Some comics are just like that. I don't inherently think that movies are a better storytelling medium than comic books, but with some comics it just feels like the transition would be very easy, almost seamless, if that makes sense. Secret identities are supposed to be secrets, right? Like, that's why they call them secret identities and not civilian identities or whatever. One organization that you'd think would understand that is the Justice League. But based on something we see in Justice League Unlimited #3, that's apparently not the case. So I understand that some superheroes know who other superheroes are. Superman knows who Batman is, Batman knows who the Flash is, etc. Now, in this Justice League Unlimited book, the League has been expanded into basically an army that's headquartered on a watchtower in space. But just because that's the case doesn't mean that all the various superheroes know each other's identities now. Like, I would think that would create a whole litany of problems. So it didn't make sense to me on the opening pages of this issue when the Question is just walking through the halls of the watchtower and two different heroes say hi to her and refer to her by her civilian name, just openly and freely. Like, I don't know if these watchtower scenes should be written like they're in an office building where, you know, Tom passes Steve by the water cooler and asks him about the football game over the weekend. You know, stuff like that. Let's also point out that the Question and many of the various superheroes we see on the watchtower are still wearing their masks. I mean, if they all know each other's identities, then why are they wearing masks still? I don't know. I get that this is a superhero comic, and maybe I'm thinking about this too hard, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Also, I'm not sure if the space cowgirl look for the Question is growing on me. I don't know, I'll give it some more time, I guess. As these issues have progressed, I've come to appreciate the Airwave character more and more, who's kinda sorta in the main character role. I say kinda sorta because we don't have a ton of time with him compared to what a main character would usually get. But, you know, he's like a young, low-level superhero, and that's a neat perspective to have in a book like this where you have an army of these iconic superheroes.